Bleak Faith Forsaken. Yeah, in typical Souls-like fashion, you can kind of take one look at any of the environments, any of the characters, any of the cutscenes, and be like, something terrible has happened. So we've got our this one's a bit more of a technologically themed. I don't want to say post-apocalypse, but detriment to civilization type event. We've had some sort of overrun of technology, and whatever we had before has just gone terribly bad. The world you're exploring is called the Omni structure, and you got kind of like this strangely technological take on what you would expect from dark fantasy. And like a lot of the costumes and stuff, they kind of look almost like Roman in design. You know, you got your little like Spartan mohawk and, still kind of medieval, but your character is kind of like an avatar. He's like some kind of machine being controlled by, I don't know, just an ether or like a displaced soul. And not to be Souls-like punny, but it's brutal in a lot of ways. But again, the challenges are actually pretty rewarding. Now my only point of reference for this is Elden Ring, so that is that's kind of what I have to go off of here. And there's enough mechanical differences to make me feel like I'm not playing just a complete Elden Ring clone. It's
that's a refresh. A lot of these Souls-like games, they some of them do get that feeling of like high stakes, timing focused combat, correct? But at the end of the day, it's like you said, you boil it down, and it really does just feel like maybe it like Dark Souls or Dark Souls or Elden Ring in the same neighborhood. You know what I mean? Whether we're next door or across the street, it might be, but regardless, we're still in the same neighborhood. So
yeah,
what's the big thing that makes Bleak Faith Forsaken separate itself from that Souls-like mold?
So other than its aesthetics, I would say it's some of the combat mechanics. They aren't as deep. Like if you've played Elden Ring, you might notice some things missing, like a jumping attack, or certain specialties like kicking when you have like a shield, or like you kind of have basically your light and your heavy swing and not a whole lot in between. But it's almost like a less is more approach, especially with regards to like the spells and abilities. Because there's not like a lot, but when you unlock something, it does change the game for you. Like you definitely feel the sense of like, oh, I unlocked a new power, And on that note, you also have to you don't unlock abilities like just kind of automatically every time you level up. Like you get perks, but if you want to actually learn magic, which in this case we call technomancy, and instead of like magic points, your energy is called flux. You're channeling your flux to do these abilities.
Okay.
Yeah, you actually have to find items to unlock them. So I tried to go a little magey at first, but I ended up just going with like light armor and fast weapons that your stamina bar comes into play very heavily, whether you're swinging a sword or pulling back the drawstring of your arrow. You can deal a lot of good damage if you sort of take your time and go for those heavier hits or those longer bow draws, and everything feels very impactful. Like I really didn't think I was gonna get as immersed into the combat as I did, but once I started figuring out my kind of light builds and utilizing my dodge rolls, man, I actually got pretty into it. I was immersed. But another thing that makes it not Elden Ring is the way you explore. because I could not for the life of me find a map in this game.
Oh, all right.
Yeah. You have checkpoints, and they sort of take these converging and diverging paths. Like, you don't really know which direction you're heading. Like, I couldn't tell you the entire time I was playing like where north was. You just kind of have to go.
Oh, wow.
And whatever, come what may, you know, whatever path you find, you just got to take it. So you unlock these homunculus is what they were called, these checkpoints.
All right.
And you can kind of teleport between them. So you know, I got maybe through the first like 5 areas, and it tells you when you're going into a new area, but you can teleport back and forth between them. You can kind of re-explore areas with newfound abilities and lust for combat.
And when you tap those, are they kind of like the bonfires where like you can get restored your health and your resources, but all the enemies respawn around you?
Yeah, actually, just about. Anytime you use one of those rest points. Yeah.
All right. Okay. So it harkens to the classic Souls style gameplay. And you know what? This B-roll is pretty good. I'm seeing a lot of. The combat looks pretty snappy and weighty. It looks like your dodge rolls they look like you're a pretty slippery dude. So like, is the combat more fast and frantic, or is the combat much more like a Dark Souls style where it's like you really have to place it right, like every shot really counts?
Yeah, you really do have to place each attack carefully, because there's actually if you see a little bit of glowing in the weapons,
ooh,
your weapon glows when it's time for you to like go for another attack, and that timing can be pretty crucial. So like, even if I'm just doing light attacks, you press the button at the right time, it makes your next attack go harder and faster. And same thing with parries too. I kind of had a hard time getting used to the timing with parries, as I usually do with this style of game, but when I land them, because you usually take health damage and stamina, but if you land a perfect parry, you take like very little health damage and mostly just stamina damage, and it just pays off. So that if you can nail the timing, it actually feels really rewarding in combat. But I kind of take the slippery dodge roll out more often than not because of my light, fast character design. But if I was using a halberd for a little bit, and man, the slower weapons with the heavier damage, like, yeah, you have to be that much more thorough when deciding when to go in against your enemies.
And that's one of the things that I was gonna say, because I didn't get to play this one, but you were playing it pretty much all weekend, and I was gonna. It looks like the game looks pretty responsive. When you're wailing on this boss, the hits that you're landing, I like the effect that happens. It makes it like the slight little like half a millisecond pauses that hit every time your own attack lands and connects with the enemy. It makes it feel like your attacks have a lot of weight to them, especially when you charge it up. You see it in here a few times in the B-roll, you charging up an attack and then just whapping on a dude, boom, and like your camera gives you that little bit of slowdown, and then you just get right back into the action, to the point where your character looks like you can just snap a dodge roll right back immediately as you're jumping back into it. But one of the things that I wanted to ask was about the weapon and equipment variety. Oh, another thing that's really cool, if you've been watching the B-roll, you didn't catch that. That looks like there's a little bit of a light platforming action in here too, where he's got to jump over the shockwave attack that the boss is doing with a huge leap. So it's like cool Conan the Barbarian style. Very I will say it looks a lot more fluid than like a Dark Souls style game. Looks more kind of like, it reminds me of more like a Neo style, where you're moving really quick, as opposed to just like, oh man, here comes like the big hit, and then like I dodge that hit or I parry that hit, and then like, oh shit, and he gets me with the quick kick, or like he hits me with the hill, and then oh my god, now my guy gets stunned and I get hit with a huge attack. boom. You know, this game looks way quicker, way more fast paced. But back to the gear and stuff like that, did you feel like there was a lot of different kinds of weapons and armor, or did that kind of feel a little bit lacking or a little bit linear?
You know, there was actually a lot of variety. What I didn't find in like the first 5 to 7 areas was a shop, actually.
Oh wow. Okay.
I didn't really see any sort of like currency involved. But there is actually like light, medium, and heavy armor, and they all kind of make a difference. There's 3 types of damage as well. There's sharp, blunt, and technomancy. So
Hey.
magic technically. So there's a couple of lighter options that will defend better against technomancy, you know, and you kind of look more like a sorcerer, and the outfits actually look pretty cool. It's like kind of brutal. Even though some of the visuals, like, it looks cool, the motions and the action, maybe you don't want to stare too hard at like the grass and like little details like that.
Right.
Some of those can be pretty lackluster, and you're definitely not in for like a very colorful game, because I mean, you know, this is sad, depressing, bleak technology gone wrong everywhere, all gray concrete kind of vibe. But I gotta tell you, there are some pretty emotionally gripping parts where just exploring and fighting the enemies, like if you see me fighting the giant bug in the B-roll, those guys put a little bit of the fear into me, especially when I run into one in like a tunnel or like a tight space. There's certain environments that are really kind of like emotionally evocative, and I was like, okay, I'm feeling the horror element right now, whether it's body
okay.
or techno horror. Like that's part of what grabbed me a lot more than I initially expected, was the kind of the emotional impact of the exploration.
The atmosphere, would you say, is like pretty on point?
Yeah. That being said, some of the camera angles can get a little wonky, especially in tight quarters, or like going up and down circles of stairs. Like there was a couple of fights I encountered where it's like, oh wow, I'm just gonna get out of this area because I don't want to have to deal with the camera in this tight space next to these stairs and a high ledge. But
as that
a little
normally
bit
happens.
more verticality. Yeah, it's not too uncommon, but there's a good amount of like verticality and stuff to explore too, because like you'll definitely run into like there's
so
an
you're gonna
item
be going
up on that ledge. Yeah, there's like I mentioned, you need to gather certain items to unlock the technomancy abilities. So there's definitely stuff to explore there, and secrets to be told.
I mean, that sounds pretty awesome. I think I think that's cool that the big jumps and the leaping action isn't just contained to like dodging attacks, that they actually incorporated it into the level design as well. And it actually kind of sounds like the game is a bit deep, where you've got 3 different kinds of attack damage styles and 3 different kinds of armor styles, and I'm sure they all interact in their own unique ways, right? Like,
Yeah, exactly.
so it definitely seems like there's a lot more to beneath the surface. And I gotta tell you, Drix, when I'm looking at this B-roll, I could feel the claustrophobia that you're trying to tell me, because like right here in this B-roll, if you're checking it out, my God, he was in this catacomb area, in these underwater aqueduct catacomb things, and oh my God, all of a sudden rounds a corner, giant bug, red eyes. And it was cool because you see the light, the silvery light reflecting off the water, but when he turns, those red eyes flick on, and it's the only thing you can see in that darkness. So I 100%, oh, see, there it is again, right there. You can see it in the B-roll, those eyes, and it turns the whole area around it red. That is crazy looking. So yeah. Definitely an atmospheric game. Definitely has that, I can understand that evocative horror nature. So, man.
Don't be afraid to pull out your torch, which I discovered later, and also an item called a glow bug that helps you illuminate your surroundings too. But parts of it are pretty brutal. Yeah, so like the not having a map. The only miss with the atmosphere was like the soundtrack kind of, it seemed to like swell up and disappear kind of at inappropriate times. Like I'd be in the pause menu and then it would just sound like I was in a fight, and it's like, okay, that's I could use that in a few
Action
minutes
menu.
when I'm actually, yeah, the menu was a lot more action packed sonically. But still some pretty interesting sound design, and you can hear like the Elden Ring Souls influence with just like it's very atmospheric until it becomes in your face and just grows to this crescendo of ominous blight.
And that's hey, you know what? At least visually it nails it. Even if the soundtrack is a little topsy-turvy, a little everywhere at times, you know, I mean, action menus, right? That kind of idea and that kind of like sound design has been plaguing games for a long time. I remember a lot of old games on like on the early CD consoles had that weird quirk too, where like you would have like your gameplay be like weird ambient noises or like lo-fi music, and then you flip into the menu and it's like do 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 do, and it's like like an upbeat thing in the menu. You're like, all right, we're in the menu. I'm like equipping gear, you know. So
yeah.
like
Loadout time.
Loadouts, baby. So I understand that. But at the end of the day, I will. I have to ask when I got the story and the world building of the whole thing. How did that end up feeling? Like, did that really sink into you, or was it more the visuals?
It was kind of the gameplay that really sells the story, because the opening cutscene was actually like the only one that I got. So you definitely don't have the the classic AAA problem of like, oh no, I've been watching cutscenes for 45 minutes. Like, it's kind of the exact opposite. It kind of brutally, like the aesthetics just kind of plops you in this world, and the best way to actually learn about it is to talk to some of the NPCs and like talk to them a bunch, and they actually revealed some like funny and quirky storytelling moments, a little bit of like dark humor, but yeah,
okay,
that was another, it's almost like an aesthetic or like stylistic choice where it's like you learn just enough that you can make your own decisions about why what's happening is happening. Like, clearly like a technological blight has befallen the land, but man, you're gonna have to really like win some fights and land those hits if you want to learn more, and so you can make better inferences and judgment about what the heck is going on here,
So is it a little bit straightforward at the end of the day, or was there still holes and like things maybe you think you might have missed in that, like in the narrative?
If I missed anything in the narrative, there's probably more than a few holes, but it's definitely gripping enough to where like I want to go back and revisit areas that I passed through. I want to go a couple checkpoints back and just make sure, because there's no map. I don't know where I've been or what I've done.
I didn't think about it like that.
Yeah, so it's like, what if I just go back like another checkpoint and like instead of going right, like I go left, and then you never know, there could be like an NPC there or somebody there I can talk to, maybe an item I missed that could just completely change the game and the outcome of the future of where you're headed in the Bleak Faith.
And you know what, Drix, that sounds pretty awesome. You know what, the fact that you want to go back and revisit it and makes me feel like pretty confident that this is a game worth at least checking out, especially since on top of it, we might get a lot of these dark fantasy style Souls-like games, but we don't get a lot of them that are sci-fi. And I like how this one looks quick and snappy, and it's got a little bit of depth, even if it might just be like a rock paper scissors style thing, or maybe easy on the surface. There's still a lot of thinking you need to do when there's multiple damage types involved with interacting with multiple different types of damage resistance or armor.
Yeah,
so
you got a good amount of like crafting and gathering stuff. You can make like a bunch of health and mana potions, different kinds of arrows. Once I got my arrows upgraded, that made the bows a whole lot more fun. And you can use, you have like a belt of items, so you have like
all
2
right.
health potions and 2 mana potions, but in order to restore them and use more, you kind of have to like finish your fight and get out of combat. So that makes like taking on groups of enemies especially dangerous. If you're like, oh no, I'm out of potions, like I kind of need to retreat for a little bit before I take these guys on again.
Okay, so there's a fair bit of strategy as well. That sounds awesome.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, there's enough differences in what you would expect from a Souls-like or from Elden Ring that it does feel like a unique experience and has its own identity and not just a new paint job. But you know, all in all, I'm rounding this one out with a solid 3 out of 5. Definitely play
Nice.
if you're a fan of this type of game. Maybe not for everybody, especially if you're not into the aesthetics or the sort of brutality of story and gameplay that it presents. But I've found myself pretty immersed and enjoying this title a lot more than I had initially thought as a, you know, not often Souls-like gamer. Yeah, 3 out of 5 from Drix here at CFM Radio.
Well, there you have it, folks. 3 out of 5 from Drix at CFM Radio, right here, right now. Sounds like a pretty awesome game if you're a fan of the genre. Maybe if you know, I will say aesthetically, at least at a glance, right? Because I'm checking out this B-roll with you. At a glance, it definitely has the same aesthetic hallmarks of that Souls-like genre, I guess you could call it.
That grit.
Yeah, that gritty, dark. It even has like that weird high fantasy aspect to it because, like, you know, I'm looking at the B-roll and you're like in like a ruined castle meadow, you know, like.
Yeah, with way too many tubes coming out of it or something.
Yeah, so like if you're not a fan of the aesthetic, I can understand why you would say that, like, this might not be for you and this isn't gonna like change hearts and minds, right? But if you're down with this, like, I would like this. I'm a Souls-like fan. I like Souls-like games. I want to try to give this a shot simply because the action looks so fast and furious. Like, and I really want to try these big leaps and this like platform fighting action.
Yeah, it's a really solid like indie take on the whole Souls aspect. It was really enjoyable. So check it out if you're a fan and try something a little different than what you might already be used to, and you'll probably enjoy this one.
And that's Bleak Faith Forsaken, and that is on we reviewed it on PS5. That's what.
Oh yeah.
What you're seeing.
Yeah, it's been out on PC for a year. I think it's actually on sale right now.
Nice.
But the console version just dropped yesterday, I think.
Well, perfect. There you go. If you are looking for a new Souls-like for your PS5, you gotta check out Bleak Faith Forsaken.